Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Jeune Maman podcast. I'm your host, Aissatou Gise, and this is a podcast where we talk about all things pregnancy, postpartum, motherhood, tips and tricks. You've heard that from me week after week, but today we're actually going to put that into action because we have our first guest speaker. I'm so excited because we've been playing cat and mouse like, honestly, it's felt like forever. We've been playing cat and mouse, just trying to coordinate our schedules. We're finally able to sit down and record this episode. I'm so excited for you guys to hear from her. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce my guest speaker for the day. Ndeya, would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yes. Hi, Isa too. I'm so glad that we're finally able to sit down and do this. So my name is Ndeya Samb. A lot of people know me by Ndeya Samb, and I go off of Black Curl on Instagram. And I'm a mother, and a wife. And yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about yourself. Where do you live? What do you do? When did you become a mother? How's motherhood going for you? All those things.
Yes, absolutely. So we just recently moved to Dallas, and I have a 18-month-old, a very busy, interesting, bubbly 18-month-old, my son, my pride and my joy. And motherhood is it's beautiful. I love it. It's the best hood I've ever been in. Um, and it has its moments. My midwife used the term that I just love, which she said, motherhood is a beautiful disaster. And I can agree 100% because, you have your moments, it has its ups and downs, but I wouldn't change it for anything in the world.
That's a really good analogy. Well, maybe not analogy is not the right word, but it's a good way to describe it because there are those moments where you feel like your world is going to fall over on top of you. It's so
Absolutely.
overwhelming. And then like the blink of an eye, it goes back to being such a beautiful experience. Your baby smiles at
Hmm.
you and you're like, okay, it's going to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that about yourself. Like I said, I'm super excited about this episode. We've been talking back and forth, just me and you around what we're going to talk about, when we're going to have time to record. We're finally here. So
Hmm.
I wanted to just, kind of get into how this episode is going to go for our listeners so they have, an understanding of what they can expect. You and I will just be having candid conversations around certain topics. I'll ask questions here and there. Feel free to ask me questions here and there. I really wanted to just be a conversation about motherhood so far with an emphasis on like prioritizing your baby. When we were talking prior to recording the episode, that came up a lot in terms of in our culture, we see so many people have babies. We see so many people raise babies, but there seems to
Hmm.
be kind of this gap around prioritizing the baby, making sure the baby comes first in everything that you do. And we've had
Hmm.
personal experiences where maybe that wasn't the case for us. And now as mothers, as new mothers, we're trying to break some of those cycles. So that's kind of going to be like the theme throughout the episode. And I want to start off with just an open-ended question of like, when you hear prioritizing your baby, what does that mean to you?
To me, that means putting my baby first, putting my baby's needs first, listening to my baby, trying to understand what it is that they're trying to communicate to me at that moment,
Mm-hmm.
connecting with my baby, um, just really understanding, because like my actual heartbeat in human form, right? So it's like I want to understand this little human being that God has blessed me with.
Mm-hmm.
So that comes first, is understanding my child. What is it that you're trying to communicate to me? What is it that you're trying to say to me? Of course, they don't have the words. They can't talk yet. So as a mom, it's my job. It's my job and duty. The fact that, like, I birthed this whole child by the grace of God. It's my job and my duty to make sure I understand and I care for, and I'm going to use the word understand a lot, but understanding my child, and I'm trying to meet their needs as they try to communicate it the best way that they can, and the best way that they know. So it's my job for me to pick that up and understand and try to meet my child's needs as best to my knowledge, even though it's completely different from the way that I was raised. As I'm choosing a different route from the way that I was raised to raise my child.
One thing that you said that stuck with me was like connecting with your child. I feel like that as a mom, you feel like it would just be innate, like it would just come automatically. But I remember when I gave birth and everyone was like, oh, when your baby's crying, like, don't pick them up. Just let them cry it out. And I hated hearing that so much because it made me feel like you just said, your child is trying to communicate something to you and you're choosing to ignore it. You're like, nope, I'm going to let you cry it out. I'm going to let you just get it out of your system while I sit there and not react. One, I think that's so hard to do as a mom. Like, you're gonna want to react. You're gonna want to pick them up and see what they need. And I think you should. Like, there's certain things that, like, if your baby's well fed, diaper change, and they're just having like a little moment, that's different than if they're literally crying and you're like, no, I'm gonna let them get used to crying. Because for me, the way that I experienced it was, it made me feel like there was an emotional need that I wasn't meeting for my child. Like, they needed to be comforted. They needed to be held. And I always was baffled when people said things like that, because literally babies are babies. We wouldn't be calling them babies if they didn't cry for no reason. So it just was always funny to me, because I think when you build that connection with your child and that understanding that you talk about, it doesn't become a burden to respond to your child's emotional needs. It's a relationship you want to build, and you don't build that by ignoring them.
100%. 100%. I agree. Your child is supposed to feel safe with you. And you're supposed to be the safe haven for your child, right? So if your baby's crying and you're just letting them sit there and cry, it's like, it's hard for them, but it's also hard for you as a mom.
Yeah.
I can't sit there and just let my baby scream off the top of their lungs, because I know that, the diapers change and they're not hungry. But this child was in your womb, right, where they heard your heartbeat for 9 months, almost 10 months in my case. My son was overbaked in my case. But they're used to your heartbeat. So even just picking them up and just sitting the baby on top of you and let them hear your heartbeat is just soothing them. And that's going to comfort them. So that whole thing that, Baiko with joy, let them cry it out. No, that I absolutely do not agree with. And I did not do that. I was not comfortable doing that. And I didn't do that. I don't agree with that at all.
And what's funny is if you do that, like if you comfort your child and you go to them when they are asking for you, it can, like, you get comments that you're enabling them, or that and it's like, the baby, I don't know, maybe I need to do research around this, like at what point the baby can be manipulative, but it's not when they're really small. Like, babies cannot manipulate you into giving them love, into giving them affection and attention. So I reject that whole notion too. Like, there's no way you can overlove your baby. And like you said, you're their safe place. So I find it really sweet that they're calling out for you. It may be overwhelming. You may have other things that you need to get done, but when you have a baby, that's your number one priority. So everything else can wait.
Absolutely, 100%. Everything else can wait. Like, why does a newborn baby have to be manipulated? Like, why? Like, why do we have to label a newborn baby that your child is manipulating you? Like, why that stigma? That shouldn't be the first thing. And
Mm-hmm.
also, I'm a first time mom. What do you expect me to
Yes.
do?
Agree.
Yeah,
Like that's the only thing I know how to do. I've been praying for this baby for 9, 10 months.
exactly.
So that's so true. So in terms of like being a new mom, what are some of the challenges? I have so many that I can highlight. Actually, the episode that I released this week was about certain comments that people were making to me that I didn't really appreciate. Because I feel like in our culture, people have opinions no matter what. Like there's always going to be somebody who says something that you didn't ask them to say or that just was unwarranted. But in terms of like being a new mom, trying to raise the baby the best way you know how to, and then you know your baby best. So like you know what you should or should not do. What have been some challenges that you faced in trying to be the best mother that you can?
Oh, that's a really good question because, like you said, in our community, it's always so many different opinions. Everybody always has something to say. Um, First and foremost, I follow my gut. I listen to my gut, right? My first instincts, like if I know that something is happening with my child and they need me and they need my attention, I'm going to follow that. For example, not for example, this is actually reality. My
Mhm.
son is really attached to me. He's never
Mhm.
been to daycare. He didn't start daycare until he was 15 months. It really just has been me and him. His dad works, so, and then he's, you know, fully breastfed. So he's just really been around me, and it's just really just been me and him for the most part. He has not seen his grandparents or anybody else. So that's my tellement
That's
like
what that. Mhm.
to the yes, a lot, so much. So when we go out in public, it's automatically like stranger danger. Stranger danger. Who are you? I don't know you. And my son has this resting face. It's so funny. And I swear he gets this from me. He does not play. He will not smile at you if he doesn't want to. So if some, like even a family member, when they try to go for him and he says no, I'll say, okay, give him time. Give him time. He has to warm up to you. Let
Mhm.
him get comfortable. We're not going to force this. And once they give him that time and they allow that time, they'll see how he'll start to easily open up and he'll give you a high five and then he'll start talking. That means he's getting comfortable. Um, but I've also heard them say, "Oh, the fareo wala, danko tama lo kami, moy lolo," and that's
Mhm.
really not the case. If he's not comfortable, let him get comfortable. We're not going to force anything. I'm trying to think of another one. There has been so many. There has been so many because I'm choosing, like I said, I'm choosing a completely different route on how to raise my son compared to the way that I grew up. Um, it's not familiar to them at all, and I think it makes them a little uncomfortable. It's especially speaking for like my family members because it's just not what they're used to. So because I am
Mhm.
breaking that, because I'm breaking that, it also goes against of what they know and what they believe
Mhm. Yeah, and I think a really important point that you touched on was like having the child, like letting the child have input in this. So
in.
it's
Absolutely.
interesting with, yeah, with babies, they're not going to open their mouth and say, hey, I feel uncomfortable or I don't want to do this. But as a mom, you can pick up on those cues. And so I think in our culture, we have a tendency to kind of just push things onto the child. Like, because you're the adult, you are going to give them what to eat. You're going to give them what to wear. You're going to do this. You're going to do that without any room left for like the child to give you feedback on that. So your example of being out with people that they don't know is perfect. I feel like so many of us deal with that because especially in the, like, if you're not in Senegal where there's like this open concept of you seeing people every day, here, your baby's
Mhm.
probably going to see you and your husband. Like, that's it. And so they're not going to be used to people. And so when they do get around other people, there's a hesitancy to be open, play, and just be welcoming. And I feel like that's normal. Instead of saying that the baby, the fareo, or the katama, whatever, just embracing the fact that that's the reality that we have to deal with as new moms here. And it doesn't take away from the fact that our babies are perfectly fine, that we're doing a perfectly fine job as well. That's just the nature of the environment that we're in. So I feel like really listening to the baby and taking into account what their experience might be without pushing our own experiences or what, our parents, what they experienced when they were younger. For them, maybe they never seen a baby who hadn't seen more than two people in their 6 months of life. Like that's a real reality for a lot of babies here. So I don't think that
Absolutely.
we should take away from what the baby is experiencing just because they can't like verbalize it.
Absolutely. Also, I know a lot of people will feel some type of way about that. Like, why do you feel some type of way as an adult? I mean, that's something you should check for yourself, because this is a baby.
Yeah.
Only has literally been on Earth for 18 months. Why do you feel some type of way? What is going on?
I agree. It's like
You know? It's
no,
crazy.
that's a good point. That's a really good point. I know some challenges that I've had is just being regarded as stubborn when I stick to certain things about my child. Like if I don't
Mhm.
want to, for example, cut my baby's hair twice, like tolenting, if I don't want to cut their hair
Mhm.
twice, that has become such a thing. Like it's a topic of conversation across family members. And I get so much like crap about it. Like, oh, your baby's not going to have beautiful hair because you don't cut it a second time. It's not going to grow fast. It's not going to this and that. And it's like, thank you for your input. Keep it to yourself next time. Like, I've made a decision to do something
Mhm.
and it has nothing to do with you. And so it would just be nice to not have to hear that every other second that I've made the wrong decision. And I think that's something culturally we have a problem with. Like, it's hard for anyone to take themselves out of a situation that has nothing to do with them. They just have these comments and this feedback and these unsolicited advice that they want to give, no matter how it makes you feel. And I have a really big problem with that because I think it's already hard enough to try to do the right thing by your child and be the best that you can be. So when you get all this like external negative criticism, it can really take a toll on you.
Absolutely. It can definitely take a negative toll on you, because it's already hard, right?
Mhm.
So, let alone that, you're always being criticized, or you're always being questioned if you're doing the right thing or not. It just you don't feel you just don't feel as confident sometimes. But sometimes you just have to let that roll down your back,
Mhm.
let it go, and just do what you do. Like, at the end of the day, I'm going to do what's best for me, and I'm going to do what's best for my child. I understand you might have great intentions, or, but at the end of the day, if that doesn't work for me, it doesn't work for me. I'm not going
Yes.
to do it. No respect. And you shouldn't even take offense to that, honestly. You give your advice, it's either I take it or I don't.
Yep.
And like, we should, in our community, we have to normalize that. You gave me your
Mhm.
advice. Okay. Thank you. Can we move on to something else?
But that's the thing though. Advice is not just advice in our community. It's like a mandate. If somebody gives you advice and you don't take it, I don't know why they take such great offense to it because it's literally called advice. Like I should take it into consideration, but ultimately the decision is on me. And I feel like that's not how it goes. What it becomes, especially with like mothers or aunts or sisters who have gone through it before, they feel like their advice should just be default. That's what you do, no questions asked.
Yeah, no. And I get it. And I know that's how they want it to be, but no. No, I'm not a child. I'm not a baby. I just literally had a child. So let's give each other that respect, and let's just give each other that safe space where we're allowed to say, "Oh, okay, I'll think about it, or I'll see
Mhm.
if that works for me, and if that works for the baby." Like that's how it should be, and
Mhm.
you know it's not, but that's how it should be.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So in dealing with family though, how do you navigate that? I know for me, it's like one of those situations that's easier said than done. Like I can sit on this podcast all day long and be like, well, I'm going to do what's best for me. But we know in reality, it's much harder to set
Yeah,
those boundaries.
absolutely.
Yeah. How do you navigate that?
It's funny because I'm learning how to set boundaries in my adult age now because I was never allowed that space to do that.
Mhm.
Um, so it's definitely easier said than done. That is a fact. But my family know that I am very strong-headed, and if I really don't want to do anything, and I'm not comfortable with it, I'll definitely communicate it to them.
Mhm.
So, and that's where the mga American comes in. Mga American, or you don't listen. That's when all that comes in, when you do try to set boundaries or when you're not comfortable doing anything. And
Mhm.
honestly, I have never been able to do that until I had a child, until I had my
Mhm.
own baby. I was never, I'm a one fit be to say no. What you mean? I'm
Mhm.
not doing that until I had my own child. So in that aspect, my son has helped me grow in so many different ways, um, for the better. So
Mhm.
I try not to be rude, and I try not to be disrespectful about it.
Mhm.
But I will let you know, and I will also give you facts to back it up.
Mm.
Yeah. And also, I would also make it clear that I'm not arguing with you, because they always
Mhm.
feel like you're always being argumentative, or you're being rude, or you're being disrespectful. I'm not. Can I
Yeah.
just share my opinion and you share
Mhm.
yours? And that's even something I'm learning to do with my mom, because sometimes she'll just automatically shut me down. No, 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 because I said this. I was like, Mom, I'm not arguing
Mhm.
with
Yeah.
you. Can I just share how I feel? We're having a
Yep.
conversation, literally. So I just those are some things that I try to do to make it clear. I'm not being disrespectful. I'm not being nakakafa. I just want you to
Mhm.
understand where I'm coming from with it.
Yeah. I have similar experiences too with being like classified as argumentative when all I'm doing is just
Hmm.
sharing how I feel. And that can be so
That's the
frustrating because,
problem.
yeah,
That's
yes,
the big
because
problem, because you can't even communicate. Even being
no.
the communicator, you're being argumentative, but that's not true.
Yes, I feel like as adults, we should be able to just have conversation, even if we're not on the same page, but still be able to talk
Hmm.
as civilized adults. But what it becomes is, as long as, or as soon as you don't agree with what they're saying, then you're being argumentative, you're being disrespectful. And it's like, no, I'm allowed to have an opinion that's different from yours. And that's okay. Like the
Hmm.
way that I can respect your difference in opinion, I would love the same grace. But that rarely is the case, because what it ends up being is if someone gives you advice and you don't take it, or they tell you something and you're like, well, thank you, but I don't agree. It ends up being this whole thing of you're not being respectful. You don't respect the knowledge that we have, that we've, gained. Like you always hear like, Malin, you can say, I did not. And it's
Oh,
like,
that's a big one.
yes. Like, thank you. Yamaji's acting up, but the reality that you face and the reality that I face are a little bit different. So let me just educate you on what I'm going through so we can be like more harmonious. But that's not really encouraged, I feel like, in our community. Our moms, or the elders, is essentially like they feel like they've gone through it, they know best, and what they say is fact and only fact, without any like there's no room for you to be like, well, here's a different perspective. No, you just have to do what they say, and that's it. So one thing I've been doing a much better job of is, because the argumentative quote unquote route doesn't work, I just have learned the power of yes. And yes, as in, like, you're going to tell me something, I'll be like, okay, inshallah. And then I'm going to go to my house and I'm going to do what works for me. Like, I don't have
Mhm.
to go back and forth with you if I know it's not going to work. I'm just going to tell you, okay, I'm
Mhm.
going to be in a problem. And then I'm going to go do what I want to do. Because, when you start getting into that cycle of, like, trying to justify what you're saying, some people are not in a headspace that they can really get that. They don't care to understand. So you're just wasting your
Absolutely.
breath. Mhm.
Absolutely. I agree. I agree. Sometimes that is just what you have to do. You just have to say, okay, yalla bahna.
Yalla
Okay.
bye.
And then yeah, and then when you go home in the comfort of your own home, you do what you do. That's what sometimes that's just really literally what you have to do. Even just sometimes you just don't have the energy to even have to thoroughly explain everything
Yes.
because they still won't understand.
Mhm.
So it's like, okay. Yeah. Yalla bahna.
Inshallah has saved me a lot of trouble.
Inshallah. Oh yeah, absolutely. You hit them with the inshallah. You're like, oh yeah, yalla bahna,
Yalla bye.
inshallah.
That's so true. Oh my goodness. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit into a topic that when we initially linked up, that was like, top priority for us, and it still is. It's around baby nutrition. So now that we have
Mhm.
these little monsters that we have to take care of, how do we feed them, and how do we feed them well? And what are some of the, like, cultural challenges that we face in doing that, especially not being home where things are a little bit different here?
Yes, absolutely. So I just want to give a disclaimer really quick. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nutritionalist. I'm just really big on research, and I just want to talk about my experience and what works for me and what works for my family and my son. Um, Nutrition is big. I'm very big on nutrition, and I really do think it has to start with you. I had the
Mm,
intention, yes, I had the intention to start a healthy lifestyle for myself before I even became pregnant with my son. So it was also kind of easy for me to know what I wanted to put in my body and what I wanted to introduce to my son as well. That's a really, it's, it's, yeah, it's a lot because in our culture, we really all we really know is tip. We overcook the vegetables where you think go to the point where the value of the vegetable is not even there anymore.
mhm.
Um, so basically to not like not make it too long, nutrition for your child is very important. Like paying attention to and being intentional to what you're feeding your child is very, very important because we all know about pesticides. We all know about processed sugar, sodium. It can all lead to so many things to the point where even a delay with your child as far as them not talking. And I feel like that's a whole nother topic too, even
Mhm.
when it comes to television, too much TV, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody's going to have their own opinion. But when it comes to nutrition specifically, what your child eats plays a huge part, in my opinion. Um, and back home in Senegal, they'll come on. I'm not against roux, that's fine. But
Mhm.
dañuy jël riz bi and suukar ko, right? Suukar ko.
Mamne.
And they're giving that suukar ko ba mu neex, and they're giving that to a baby.
Mhm.
So can you imagine xale boobu bu màggee and they start having diabetes? Do you understand why?
Mhm.
Because you've introduced processed sugar to this child and they don't need to be introduced to that so soon.
Mhm.
Um, so being intentional about, the healthy fats. like, avocado, even down to the type of oils. You have to be I'm really specific with these things because it plays a huge role. Inflammatory oils, canola oils, those are all inflammatory oils that are not good for you. And there's so much more better options out there. Babies don't need sugar. Babies don't need salt. They don't need pepper. I've seen it. Dilo nedbi defti ki poobar nga defti jimbo xam nga wala ñu defara xale bi purée mashed potatoes xam nga buñ ko jëlee they'll put so much salt, like no, all that sodium, it's not good for the baby. Honestly, in the beginning, all they need is bland, and then when they turn 1, you can start to transition to giving them whatever you can give them. They can eat what you eat, but it's just it's not talked about in our community enough, and I just feel like they just don't understand the importance of nutrition, of value when it comes to the child.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. I remember I was watching this this Instagram video where this lady was showing what she fed her son, and I forget how old the son was. But at the end she was like, food before 1 is just for fun. And that is something I wanted to bring up because I feel like in our culture, once your baby, some people don't even wait for 6 months, but once your baby reaches 6 months and they start having solids, people think that that's supposed to replace breast milk if you're exclusively breastfeeding. And I think that's so, I don't want to use dangerous. I feel like that's a strong word, but that's not good because before 1, your breast milk is still the best source of nutrition for your baby. Like your breast milk is going to change its composition to accommodate for your baby's needs. And so the food that you're introducing them to is one for them to start exploring different textures and different foods, get introduced to the idea of chewing and eating solids, but it should not replace you breastfeeding your baby exclusively or a majority of the time. So I wanted to bring that up because, like you said, we tend to get into these like rhythms of, okay, the baby can start having solids. Let's make rui. Let's put milk. Let's put sugar. And that tends to replace the very nutritious breast milk that you were once giving your child. And it can cause developmental delays. It can just overall be much more harmful to your child than helpful. And this leads me back to like the overarching point of like babies being your priority. Like it shouldn't be an afterthought, or that giving your baby food is more convenient for you than sitting down and breastfeeding them, and therefore you should substitute breastfeeding with giving solids. Like, if you have like a junker in Senegal, it might be easy to like make the puree or have the junker actually make the puree and just give it to the baby, and now it frees up your time. But the cost of that is that your baby's not getting the nutrition from you directly. That would be very beneficial for them. So I'm talking in circles, but it's just like, we tend to get into these places where we do what we think is best for the baby without necessarily taking into account that, some of the things that we do can be harmful, and just negligently feeding the baby whatever will get them full is one way that we do that.
And the thing about that is, I know that in our community, they know that breast milk bahna, and they know that napal bahna, but they really don't understand the great values that come with breast milk, of breastfeeding your child. Not only the beautiful connection, the bond that you'll have with your child, but also the value of breast milk. It's gold. It's liquid gold. That's what they call it. It's really liquid gold. Right? So just because you're feeding your child solids and you're introducing your child to solids does not mean that you should stop breastfeeding. If anything, mix your breast milk with the sweet potatoes that you decide to start giving your baby, and put it in whatever that you're giving to them. But it's not, it shouldn't replace the breast milk or you should stop breastfeeding. No, I really truly believe they don't understand the value of breast milk.
Yes. And there's more that you can do with breast milk than just feeding it to your baby. And I know not everybody
Absolutely.
like pumps milk, but if you do, like you can use it for like a warm bath if your baby has eczema. You can use it for certain infections, like to put on the like skin. Like there's so much beauty
Yeah.
and use of breast milk. I completely agree with you. We
Yeah.
kind of just see it as like, I think it's taken for granted. Part of me feels like, oh, they have other issues to worry about. That's why maybe this isn't as big of a deal. But then, like I said earlier, if you have a baby, that is your number one priority. And so I don't know how you can just skip over that.
Yeah, it's so funny because the value, like you just said, there's so many things that you can use your breast milk for. And when my son came home, he was about 2 weeks old. I noticed a little then one of his left eye, the top lid looked like it was a little bit swollen, and
Mm.
I immediately took a picture and I sent it to my midwife, and I was telling her I don't know what this is. She was like, take a little bit of your breast milk and just dab it on top of his eyelid, and when I
Mm.
tell you it disappeared, it was gone.
Mm.
So
Yep.
it's just amazing. It's literally magic. A liquid gold. They don't in our community. They really don't understand the value of breast milk. Like you said, eczema. I'm like so many things that the breast milk and just rub it on there. Oh, I know that you said you can put it in the bath too. I also wanted to do that, but another myth in Senegal is since some of them. I have a son, don't let the breast milk touch his choo-choo because the baby begin. I think that's what they had said to me.
Well, you know what's funny is I recorded an episode this week where I talked about crazy things that people told me. That was one of
Hmm.
them, that you shouldn't let the breast
Yeah.
milk touch the genitals. And I had a question too on if it applied to boy babies too. And I'm glad that you mentioned it because it came up in this week's episode and I was like, wait a minute. Who thought to say that? Like, what makes you think that babies having breast milk touch their genitals would make them fast in the future?
It's so crazy. And I was like, I don't know, y'all about because I literally took baths with my son. And if my milk dripped in the bath water, well, look, yeah, God, I don't know where that myth came from, but it is what it is.
They just say any and everything, and you're like, why would you put this in my head now?
Yeah, absolutely not. And it's so crazy because every time it happens, I just get a little paranoid. I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my
I
God.
know, right? I know. Well, I just think, one thing that we don't do a good job of is backing things up with data or research. I think some
Oh
things are
no.
just like, passed down generation to generation, but I don't like
Hmm.
hearing things like that. It's the same as like when they say you shouldn't cut the baby's nails because when they grow up, they'll be a thief.
But you want my child to continue to scratch me up. I have to suffer.
Yes, and
I have to suffer the
scratch
consequences.
themselves up too. Like
Oh,
they scratch themselves
exactly.
so bad. Yeah, I had like my daughter has
So
woken
bad.
up with like blood scabs and blood stains because she's
Yeah.
scratching herself up. So
Yeah. No, ma'am. I purchased a little those electronic nail filers for my son.
yes, ma'am.
Let me get those fingers. I'll hold those. Yeah, no. Yeah, they're going away. That's just
They're going
crazy.
away.
Away.
No, but I think it's just like you have to put the baby's well-being first and not necessarily think about all these like extra things that have no backing, no rationale behind it. And when it comes to nutrition, kind of going back to that a little bit, it's like when you're going to cook something, cook for the baby separately. Don't think that the baby can just eat whatever it is you're eating because one, your immune system is much more developed than theirs. Your body can handle a
Hmm.
lot more than their bodies can handle. So just really putting them at the
Absolutely.
forefront of everything that you do.
Absolutely. You always have to keep, let's normalize keeping the child in mind. They're humans. You like, you can digest things better than they can. So you
Mhm.
really do have to be intentional. Um, as far as what you're giving the baby and what you're feeding them. Honestly, I don't want to say it doesn't take long, because not everybody has the time or even
Mm-hmm.
understand, time management. But it, let's prioritize the baby. They're little
Yes.
humans too. Hey, there's a
Yes.
lot of things that you need to take into consideration. Also, being a parent as well. There's just
Yes.
so many things, and I'm not saying that you're being a bad parent because you're not taking some things into consideration, but you do have to be intentional.
You do. And you have to just understand. And this is like, I don't want this to sound insensitive, because postpartum depression is real. That struggle after
Mhm.
you have the baby is so real. Like, you don't feel like
Oh yeah.
yourself anymore. You just don't.
Yeah.
And part of that is because the new reality is everything you do revolves around your baby. Like, I can't even shower without taking into consideration if my baby's gonna
Yeah.
be okay. So it's exhausting. We're not taking away from the fact that it's tiring, it's exhausting, it can be frustrating at times, but
Absolutely.
you have to do it.
Absolutely. It is. It is. It is tiring. It is exhausting. Your life literally took a whole 360. You went from carrying a child to this child literally like being in your presence the entire time.
Mhm.
So it is exhausting. It is challenging. It's hard. Motherhood is hard. Okay?
Mhm.
It's okay to say that. You're not a bad mom by saying motherhood is hard. You're not a
Yes.
bad mom by saying I'm tired. I can't do this today. I don't have the energy to do it today.
Mhm.
My breasts are sore. Like, it's hard.
Mhm.
We have to normalize that. It's okay to admit that it's hard and you're tired and you need help. We're absolutely not taking away from that fact. But
Mhm.
also, being a mom, it just comes naturally too. It just comes naturally, knowing that you just have to do what you have to do.
Mhm.
It's a gift from God, honestly.
It
But
is.
yes, it's hard. The mental load, postpartum depression, I can speak from experience because I've experienced that. I honestly seen a research saying that postpartum depression honestly really doesn't go away. It
Mm.
really doesn't. And then that goes hand in hand with postpartum anxiety. There's just so many different things that we just have to
Mhm.
normalize and give mothers
Mhm.
grace and understand them. It's hard, it's challenging, and it's an adventure
It is.
for sure.
It really is. I've had to catch myself in moments where I get frustrated and then reassure myself that it's okay to be frustrated, because it's so easy to start feeling like you're a bad mom. And then I feel like in our culture, you're not afforded that space. You kind of are just like, everyone around you has had a baby naturally. Like, kudos to them. But they've had a
I
baby
know.
naturally. They just kind of fall in line with how everything is supposed to go. There's no room for you to complain. So even just being able, oh, I don't want to call it complaining, but even just being able to talk about the challenges, I feel like is a privilege that I'm very thankful to have. But it's like we still shouldn't be made to feel bad about being able to talk about it. Like, I don't think it takes away from anyone
Mm-mm.
else's experience or my own to say that it's hard. Sometimes I struggle.
Absolutely. It's so hard, and it's true when they really say it takes a village. Like, we should not feel bad about expressing those feelings. Like, we should definitely have a safe space to be able to express how we feel. And you just have to give yourself grace. Remind yourself that this is just literally a little human being. They don't know what they're doing. And you just have to try to understand them. You're
Mhm.
the adult. So you have to regulate your emotions because you can. They cannot, but you can. So just reassure yourself, like you said, reassure yourself, give yourself grace, and don't be so hard on yourself. And also just try to remember that it's okay. It's
Mhm.
normal. You're human. You're going to get frustrated. You're going to get irritated. Everything is not going to be perfect all the time. But
Mhm.
there, once you look at your baby and you see that joy, mashallah, Allahumma barik, it's just beautiful.
Mhm.
It's just, it helps you recharge. Like,
It
okay,
does.
everything's going to be okay. Oh, you were frustrated because of this? Now I know why. Now I understand why you were so fussy. You
Mhm.
know, once you open your mind to understanding and accepting, it's a completely different world on the other side than not
Mhm.
trying to understand, or because you're pressured or pushed to not do these things because things were pushed on you. It's going to be, I honestly feel like it's going to be 10 times harder. Give yourself
Mhm.
grace.
Mhm. I agree. I completely agree. Oh, I know we've
Yeah,
been just
absolutely.
on and on about so many things, and it's been a great conversation because all these things
Mhm.
come up in motherhood, and I feel like I never had a chance to talk about it with anyone prior to having a baby. Now that I have a baby, it's
Mhm.
like only my friends who are willing to talk about it with me can I come out and talk about it. So I'm super glad that we were able to finally get together and talk about this because you're such a strong mama. You're such a good mama. Like everything that we talk about, I'm like, I see myself in it. It's good to know that there's someone else out there who's going through the same thing that I am. And I know others out there are as well. So hopefully they see
Mhm.
themselves in this episode and, realize that they're not alone. We're all going through similar scenarios, similar
Absolutely.
situations. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Absolutely. And you learn as you go. I was
Mhm.
not taught. My mom. I don't have the. My mom. Nobody's taught me these things.
Mhm.
How to be a mom and how to do things a certain way. All I was taught was how to be a wife.
Ooh,
I
say that
was
again.
not taught how. That's all I was taught is how to be a wife. I was
Mhm.
not taught how to be a mom, how to nurture your baby, and how to be patient with your baby, and how to give
Mhm.
yourself grace and love yourself in the entire process. So this is you're for any mama out there, just know that you're not alone.
Mhm.
Give yourself grace and you're learning as you go. And just remember, this is your first rodeo, especially if it's your first child. It's okay. Follow your instincts and do what works for you.
Mhm. I love that. I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much, Naya, for joining us in today's
Absolutely.
episode. This has been amazing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Please always remember that you are doing a great job. Your child is lucky to have you and they love you so much.
Oh, well,
Always
thank
remember
you.
that.
I don't know who needed to hear it, but I definitely did. So I want to thank you for that. And with that, I will give our listeners a rendezvous for next week's episode. Thank you all for listening.
Bye bye.